When the Cold War ended, the CIA quietly reassigned dozens of officers from Moscow, East Berlin, and Beijing to a threat the public barely understood, a scattered network of militants hiding in Pakistan and Afghanistan. One of those officers was a former Marine-turned-case officer, whose real name the CIA still refuses to fully reveal. Declassified files refer to him only through fragments, as a senior paramilitary advisor deployed to Pakistan before and after the 9/11 attacks, tasked with building local networks capable of tracking Al-Qaeda's movements across the tribal belt. He arrived in Pakistan in the late 1990s under diplomatic cover at the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad. His official role was listed as political officer. The real mission was far more dangerous: identify tribal intermediaries, support ISI's counterterrorism wing, and quietly map the lines of communication Al-Qaeda used from Afghanistan into Pakistan. At this point, Osama bin Laden was already listed as a target of interest, but Washington had not yet grasped the urgency. On August 20, 1998, after the East Africa embassy bombings, the CIA launched retaliatory missile strikes in Afghanistan. Inside Pakistan, the officer witnessed the ripple effects. Tribal channels went silent. ISI informants grew nervous, and Al-Qaeda members slipped deeper into the border regions. In one declassified CTC memo, officers described Pakistan as the hinge, the place where every lead either began or ended. By 2001, the CIA had quietly built one of its most sensitive counter-terror networks in Pakistan. The unnamed officer became a central figure in this effort. He coordinated local informants, paid tribal elders for intelligence, and helped ISI map the safe houses used by Al-Qaeda commanders fleeing U.S. pressure. Then came September 11, 2001. Within hours, the CIA activated Operation Jawbreaker, deploying teams into Afghanistan. But the first safe houses, the first intercepts, and the first informants all came through Pakistan, through the networks this officer had painstakingly built. Declassified records confirm that Pakistani tribal sources helped the CIA track movements of Abu Zubaydah, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and early couriers tied to Osama bin Laden. Much of that early success originated from a small, dimly lit operations room in Islamabad, where the officer coordinated round-the-clock intercepts with ISI counterparts. But as the political climate inside Pakistan shifted, especially under pressure from competing military factions, the same tribal allies who risked everything for the CIA would later be abandoned, disavowed, or even arrested. And the officer who built the network would see his role buried in classified footnotes. He didn't know it yet, but the loyalty he showed in those early years would soon cost him everything. The officer's network had just captured the biggest lead since 9/11, a single message passed through Peshawar. But instead of support, he was about to face the first betrayal that would unravel everything he had built. In the weeks following 9/11, Pakistan became the center of gravity for the CIA's hunt for Al-Qaeda fugitives. Thousands of militants fled Afghanistan, slipping through the porous Torkham and Chiman borders. The CIA officers' network, tribal informants, border scouts, and paid human assets suddenly became the most valuable intelligence pipeline Washington had. The breakthrough arrived quietly. On October 2001, a tribal contact in Peshawar passed a handwritten message to a CIA cutout. It was short, almost routine confirmation that members of Al-Qaeda's logistics wing had moved through the Khyber region. But one of the names scribbled inside changed everything. Abu Zubaydah. At that time, he was considered Al-Qaeda's external operations chief, a man Washington believed could unlock the structure of the entire terror network. The CIA officer forwarded the intelligence to both the Counterterrorism Center, CTC, and the Joint Intelligence Miscellaneous (JIM) group inside Pakistan's ISI. The message triggered an immediate expansion of surveillance. Every phone intercept in Peshawar, every known safe house in Lahore, and every suspected courier route in Karachi went under monitoring. By December 2001, the CIA and ISI launched a joint operation in Faisalabad, built entirely on the officer's network of sources. The raid ended with a dramatic capture of Abu Zubaydah in March 2002, after a fierce gun battle. Publicly, the credit went to Pakistan's security forces. Internally, CTC officers acknowledged that the decisive intelligence came from the unnamed CIA case officer who had cultivated the tribal informants. But the victory came at a cost. In the months that followed, the officer noticed a shift. Pakistani intelligence began quietly sidelining some of the very informants the CIA had worked with. Certain tribal intermediaries disappeared, arrested without explanation, relocated, or warned to stop cooperating. The internal politics inside Pakistan had shifted. Factions within the military and ISI feared the continued exposure of their own historical links to Afghan militants could become politically explosive. The officer found himself walking a tightrope. He had worked for years to build trust, sometimes paying tribal elders from discretionary CIA funds, sometimes meeting them secretly in dusty roadside tea stalls near the Khyber Pass. Now those same allies sent him messages filled with fear. They were being told to step back or step away entirely. Meanwhile, Washington demanded faster results. The hunt for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, intensified. Leads were coming from Karachi, Rawalpindi, and the tribal belt, but for the first time, the officer felt resistance inside Pakistan's bureaucracy. Files that once arrived within hours now took days. Requests for surveillance were delayed or denied. Something had changed. Still, the officer pushed forward. Through informants, he received confirmation that KSM was moving between Rawalpindi's safe houses. He passed every detail to CTC, but he sensed a storm building. Rivalries between CIA and ISI, once papered over in the early months of cooperation, were resurfacing. And soon, those tensions would erupt into the moment that defined and ultimately destroyed his career. By early 2003, the CIA's Islamabad station was running on overdrive. Every satellite image, every phone intercept, and every hint from tribal intermediaries pointed to one fact: Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was inside Pakistan. The world's most wanted terrorist, the man who designed the 9/11 attacks, was hiding in the military city of Rawalpindi, a place packed with army housing and intelligence facilities. The unnamed CIA officer, who had spent years cultivating sources, delivered the decisive clue. One of his longtime contacts, a Pashtun courier who quietly ferried information between Peshawar and Rawalpindi, reported that a high-value Arab was using a safe house in the Westridge neighborhood. The courier didn't know the name, but he described the man's bodyguards, movement patterns, and the encrypted radios they carried. It was enough. The officer relayed the intelligence to the Counterterrorism Center, CTC, and worked with ISI's counterterrorism wing to set up discreet physical surveillance. 4 days, Pakistani and CIA teams watched the home. When a man matching KSM's description appeared, CTC confirmed the identity through facial comparison. On March 1, 2003, before dawn, Pakistani security forces conducted the raid, with CIA officers nearby but not entering the building per diplomatic protocol. Their arrest was violent but brief. Inside, they found laptops, encrypted drives, codes, and documents that mapped Al-Qaeda's global operations, including plots in Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Gulf. Publicly, Pakistan claimed full credit. Privately, CIA cables credited the anonymous officers' network for the breakthrough, the same network built over years of quiet, dangerous work. But the success came with an unseen consequence. After the arrest, ISI began tightening control over access to informants. Key tribal sources went missing or refused further meetings. Some confessed to the officer that they had been threatened. Others were told they were now liabilities. Then the blow hit inside the CIA itself. Political pressure in Washington reshaped how the war on terror was narrated. The focus shifted toward Iraq, and the administration wanted clear, polished victories. Raw, complex stories involving tribal informants, messy alliances, and the CIA's dependence on Pakistan's military establishment did not fit the new narrative. The officer's role in the capture, once celebrated in classified cables, was minimized. His reports were folded under station contributions. His name vanished from briefings and internal commendations. In one instance, reported later by a former CIA official, a senior analyst said, "The Pakistanis want political distance. They don't want anyone asking how deeply we were working together." To maintain diplomatic optics, the officer's tribal network, and by extension the officer himself, became inconvenient. Then the final signal arrived. A colleague at the U.S. Embassy warned him quietly, "Your name was mentioned in a place it shouldn't have been." Someone across the street wants you gone. The officer realized something chilling. He was now a liability not just to Pakistan, but to the politics shaping Washington. The arrest of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed should have strengthened the CIA-ISI partnership. Instead, it exposed the fault lines. By 2004, Pakistan's internal politics had shifted. Factions inside ISI worried that close cooperation with the CIA was undermining their influence in Afghanistan and inflaming tribal regions. At the same time, Washington demanded Pakistan do more, especially as Al-Qaeda regrouped in Waziristan. The unnamed CIA officer, once essential, suddenly found doors closing. Meetings once held openly in ISI's Abpara headquarters were now downgraded or delayed. Requests for joint raids were under review. Informants who had risked their lives for years began warning the officer that their phones were tapped, their movements watched. Then came the first incident. During a routine drive in Islamabad, Pakistani security personnel stopped the officer's vehicle and held his local driver for questioning, a move that violated diplomatic protocol. A senior ISI official later dismissed the incident as a misunderstanding, but the message was clear: surveillance had begun. The officer reported the shift to Langley. The response was cautious. By this time, the CIA was expanding its covert drone program in the tribal areas, an operation that Pakistan publicly condemned but privately permitted. This dual-track policy made the officer a symbol of a relationship Pakistan wanted to publicly distance itself from. In late 2004, one of the officer's most reliable tribal informants disappeared. The man had provided intelligence on dozens of militants moving between Wana, Miranshah, and Peshawar. Weeks later, the officer received a message through an intermediary. "They took me. They asked about you. They said you should leave." This was not Al-Qaeda. This was Pakistan's own counterintelligence wing. The officer raised the alarm. But in Washington, political winds had shifted toward Iraq and the strategic narrative of coalition partners. Criticizing Pakistan publicly was off-limits. Questioning its internal crackdowns was discouraged. Then came the final blow. A confidential diplomatic cable, later confirmed in reporting by the Washington Post, revealed that a list of CIA personnel in Pakistan had been circulated inside an ISI subdivision. Most names were aliases, but the officer's description was accurate enough to identify him. It was the moment every undercover officer fears. He was no longer invisible. Within weeks, the U.S. Embassy instructed him to limit movement. CIA headquarters began discussing rotation options, a polite term for extraction. The officer resisted. His tribal network had warned him that several informants were being interrogated because of their ties to the CIA. Pulling out now would leave them exposed. But Washington had made up its mind. In 2006, the officer was ordered to leave Pakistan immediately. No farewell meetings, no final debrief with informants, no closure. The networks he built were left to collapse under political pressure. And the officer who had enabled some of the CIA's biggest early successes in the Al-Qaeda hunt was quietly erased, his name removed from cables, his contributions folded under station activity. He left Pakistan carrying only one fear: that the people who helped him would pay the price he had been spared. When the officer was ordered out of Pakistan in 2006, he left behind more than a safe house and an embassy desk. He left behind the men who had risked everything to help him hunt Al-Qaeda. At first, he assumed Langley would protect them. After all, many of these tribal sources had enabled the capture of Abu Zubaydah, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Some had even identified courier routes later, used to locate Osama bin Laden. But reality unfolded differently. Within months, reports filtered back to Washington and the CIA station. Several of the officer's key tribal assets had been detained by Pakistani intelligence. These were not terrorists. They were the very intermediaries who had supplied actionable intelligence to the CIA for years. According to later reporting by McClatchy and the Washington Post, ISI's internal divisions began treating CIA-linked informants as unreliable or foreign-influenced. The result was a quiet but brutal crackdown. Some sources were interrogated for days. Others were pressured to cease all cooperation. And in the tribal belt, the emergence of the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, made everything more lethal. Anyone suspected of sharing information with the Americans was at risk of being kidnapped or executed. The officer, now back in the United States, watched helplessly as his network unraveled. He sent cables asking the station to fund a relocation of at-risk informants. He pushed for temporary visas for those who had provided life-saving intelligence. He asked for the CIA to at least document their contribution so they wouldn't be forgotten. Most requests went unanswered. Inside Langley, priorities had shifted. The CIA's focus was now the drone campaign, which required geolocation technology, not tribal human networks. Human assets were seen as high-risk, low-yield. One senior official, quoted later in investigative reporting, put it bluntly, "The politics changed. We didn't want to be seen as running our own sources on Pakistan's soil." And with that shift, the officer's years of work and the loyalty of the men who helped him vanished into the classified void. One case struck him hardest. A source known in CIA cables only as Asset 2467, a tribal elder from North Waziristan, had once delivered the intelligence that confirmed a senior Al-Qaeda courier's route through Mir Ali. In 2007, Asset 2467 was abducted by militants. His family later reported he was interrogated about working with the Americans. He never returned. The officer carried that loss like a stone in his chest. But the final blow came in 2009, when the CIA station in Islamabad faced a scandal that shook the entire intelligence community. Pakistan's government leaked the name of the CIA station chief, a rare and dangerous breach. The revelation confirmed what the officer had long feared. The alliance was breaking, and when Pakistan felt pressure, it would expose American officers to deflect blame. For the officer, this confirmed the truth he had spent years trying to deny. His own government had abandoned the very people who had risked their lives for the United States. When the officer left Pakistan in 2006, his name didn't just disappear from field cables, it disappeared from the war's history altogether. This was not unusual at first. CIA officers are rarely mentioned by name. But the pattern that unfolded in the following decade revealed a deeper truth. The people who fought Al-Qaeda in Pakistan were being pushed out of sight, one by one. By the late 2000s, the CIA's drone campaign had become the centerpiece of America's counterterror strategy. The strikes crippled Al-Qaeda leadership but ignited a political firestorm inside Pakistan. The same government that privately coordinated with the CIA publicly condemned the operations, fueling public outrage. And in that climate, CIA officers became targets. In 2010, a Pakistani tribesman filed a public case accusing the CIA's station chief in Islamabad of murder over a drone strike. For the first time in modern history, the name of a serving CIA officer in Pakistan was leaked to the media. Under security threats, he was quietly evacuated overnight. It marked a new era. Pakistan's internal power struggles were now exposing American intelligence officers to settle political scores. The officer who had once run some of the CIA's most sensitive networks watched these events from Washington with a familiar ache. The alliance he had served, the one he had sacrificed for, was falling apart in slow motion. Then came May 2, 2011. When U.S. Navy SEALs found and killed Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, a Pakistani doctor named Shakil Afridi was accused of helping confirm bin Laden's identity through a fake vaccination program. After the raid, Afridi was taken into custody, charged under tribal law, and sentenced to decades in prison. His case became one of the most visible examples of what happens to those who help the CIA in Pakistan. To the officer, Afridi's fate was painfully familiar. He had seen the same story play out with tribal informants whose names would never appear in headlines. Only months later, another CIA station chief was abruptly removed from Pakistan after becoming severely ill in circumstances that U.S. intelligence officials privately believed might have been deliberate. Once again, no names were publicly confirmed. Once again, the machinery of the alliance moved on in silence. By now, the officer understood the pattern entirely. The people who helped America in Pakistan, from doctors to tribal sources to CIA officers themselves, were valued only until politics demanded otherwise. When pressure rose, their existence was denied, their service forgotten, their names erased. And that became the final truth of his story. He was one of the key architects of the early CIA hunt for Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. He helped build networks that led to the capture of top terrorist leaders. He protected allies who trusted him with their lives. But in the official record, he is not mentioned at all. He remains only what the CIA allows him to be: a line in a classified memo, a redacted paragraph in an intelligence annex, a man whose loyalty was remembered privately and erased publicly, a spy without a name.